Well, there were questions and there were questions. You're opening a literary agency sitting in a small town like Jaipur. You're trying to sell poetry and short stories as your first two books. You're also going to do literary events, and you know how challenging it is to work with sponsorships. And the list went on. The best question that I fielded, and the one to top this list, was by an editor at Little Brown Publishers who was visiting Jaipur, and we met for lunch. And he said to me, you know, what you're doing is what a literary agent does. The rest of those questions came from people who just couldn't digest that I was venturing into unknown territory with a confidence that must have unsettled them. When I spoke to this editor and I told him that I was giving feedback to other people for their writing on online portals, or also analyzing and assessing books for my friends. So that was his challenge that he threw to me. So what I'm telling you today is that this story is as much about Syahi, and it is as much about being a dreamer. The year was 2007. An empty fast food joint, a notebook, and a friend. He was scribbling a list of names, stuck on calling the agency rejection note. And he kept persisting. So the moment he said Syahi, I slapped my hand on the table and said, that's it, let's do this. And believe me, there was no formal training backing me. The only thing I knew how to do really well was to tear books apart and tell writers what didn't work and what worked. Read contracts, formulated my own Syahi author's contract with the help of a legal advisor, and work began. In a month's time, the Syahi website was up. In another 2 weeks, we had sold the first 3 books. And that's how we carried on from there. The next few years was about just organic growth. I worked with 3 or 4 energetic and as mad about books people on my team. We grew from 2 to 8, and I really don't care about numbers, but we worked on books that meant a lot to us. Authors trusted Syahi, and we in turn made them our family. A lot of it is relationship-based in our industry, and Syahi won't have made it to any of its milestones if it wasn't for publishers and writers trusting us. And when I see one of our books on a bookstore shelf, what do you think I'd feel? I think I still say it's pride, it's satisfaction, it brings a smile to my face. And if the book is not there, that's supposed to be there, an irate call is made to the publisher right at that moment. Did you know it takes a village to bring a book out? It does need a writer who imagines it to start with. That's a given. But what after that? What are the steps that are needed to be walked to make sure that a raw draft pounded on your laptop makes it to an editor's desk and then into a printing press where it's transformed into a bound book with a beautiful cover? There are 2 sides to bookmaking. One is the romantic notion of a writer shoving sheaves of her handwritten manuscript into a bag and knocking on the doors of publishers, to where we are today, when an offset machine can belt out more than 10,000 copies of a book every day. So what does a literary agent do? We are the conduit, the catalyst for an author. Our role at Syahi is to work with them through their creative process, give feedback on their writing, pitch their book to an apt list of publishers, negotiate a good deal, vet every clause of the publisher's contract in detail, handhold through the editing process, when the book jacket is being designed, when marketing and promotions are being discussed, right down to monitoring sales statements. And we work at multiple levels. We work with English language books for the Indian subcontinent. We work with translations into Indian languages and vice versa. We also work internationally to sell world English rights and other language rights across Europe, Asia, even Brazil and other South American countries. And we're also working with screen adaptations for our books very, very actively. Audiobooks are being handled separately now. And the best part is that on the Syahi website, you see the world comes together. We represent not only writers from India, but also from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. We have got Belgians, Americans, Canadians, Czech authors, just to name a few countries. Basic, fundamental tenet of Syahi is that storytelling is intrinsic to our DNA. We are a civilization that has a treasure trove of myths, legends, folk tales that have been handed down to us orally or through our epics, scriptures, and spiritual texts. At Syahi, we play with genres. So you can imagine how much we gain in terms of our minds being enriched and fertilized by such a large repertoire. Added to this is also the grace that comes with Gulzar Saab's writings. His poetry reaches the very core of your being and makes your heart well up with emotions. Such is the magic of his words. We've also represented a few young adult, which is a very veritable part of our bank. What I really like to do is to discover new writers through their articles, blogs, social media posts, and reach out to them with ideas and explore how we can work with them to make a book grow into their minds. And then finally out in the market. Debut authors are given a lot of support from our side as far as creative feedback at multiple stages. And we also offer professional editing services. And I try my best to ensure that each one who comes to us with their submissions is given feedback on the sample chapters to start with. Syahi's commitment is as strong to work with cross translations. Had a very painstaking, slow journey with that because translations are an art on its own and they do take more time than just the original writing of any book. So we work in Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, Hindi, Punjabi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, just to name a few languages. And across the world, we worked with French, German, Italian, Spanish, complex Chinese, Japanese, Taiwanese, Russian. We are trying to expand into this area even more as I speak. Tales, I really want to walk you down the path as to how Syahi has enriched my life with the books that have helped us transform into better human beings. Those books that have come into being just with the germ of an idea, and we've helped it to develop into a full-fledged narrative. I can never forget the morning that Bhanu Athaya, our first ever Indian Oscar winner for costume design for the movie Lagan, walked into my office with two large suitcases full of photographs and sketches of her designs since the start of her career. This was more than 15 years back. So I pushed all the furniture out of my office, and the entire office floor, which is about 40 feet by 20 feet roughly, every inch of it was covered by her photographs and papers. We sat on our knees. We literally picked out groups of pictures that could be potentially put in different chapters. We discussed the content of each of the chapters. And then we took this book to publishers, which was fun, challenging, because it was going to be a big coffee table book. And when that book came out, it was one of those moments of triumph because Bhanu was a creative genius to work with, and the whole process of putting a book together, which didn't even have a single page written, was the challenge that we had to go on. And from then onwards, we've worked with a lot of books like this. I just wanted to give this one story, but there are lots of other books that we have helped grow right from the very start, or maybe one sentence, one conversation, a brief meeting somewhere, a podcast got converted into a book. So all of this keeps happening in our journey at Syahi. Like every day of our working life is filled with so much excitement, not to say that it doesn't have its challenges, but what keeps us going is that we continue to be surprised. And that is what makes me greedy to open every submission with an absolutely blank mind. I'm like an empty sponge every morning when I step into my office. And the idea is to seize each day and work with new mediums and technology. Audiobooks are something that we are dealing with in a big way now, and also working to make sure that we sell our authors' books rights for screen adaptations. So a lot of optioning is being done, and a lot of licensing is being done with production houses or with our film sub-agents, however we work. And for me, it's never been about getting books published. It's also about promoting them, and we handhold our authors through the process of marketing their books, which can always be a little more than you can imagine. Syahi will continue to spread its ink. We may not work with getting primary or middle grade books for kids so much, but we do work to promote young authors. We've just had 3 high school children get their books published in the last 1 year, because that is the kind of support that I really want to give to all age groups. And one way we do it also is by curating and programming literary events, from standalone author interactions to full-fledged festivals. A focused Indian conference on translations was held way back in 2008, and it is still remembered to be one of those momentous coming together of brilliant, bright minds in translations and writing in India, their own. And for the last 2 decades, there has been, I think, 4 or 5 times or even more, the kind of work that's going in. They give us the opportunity of transferring stories from one region of the country to another, also to take it to the rest of the world. This is what India is. These are our stories. So translations are a very, very important part of what Syahi does. We also went on to create one of its kind property called Mantles of Myth, which told stories through the textile traditions of our country. And, where better but to do it? We did it in Jaipur. It is something that the scholars who came from all over the world, and our Indian scholars and the academics and the writers who spoke at this conference, still come up to us and say, when are you doing the next one? We also have been part of the founding team of the Buckaroo Festival, which is the only literary festival for children in India. We've done Woven Tales from the Northeast. We've conceptualized the Hindu Lit for Life Literary Festival. I gave the floor plan for the Manila Literary Festival. We created content for children's section at the AFWCC in Singapore. But the most beautiful decade of my life, also the most challenging, the toughest, yet the most rewarding, was the decade from 2010 to 2019, when we produced the Mountain Echoes Literary Festival in Bhutan. That was where we saw the impact of what the love of books can do to people. Where in a city, from 2 bookstores, they've gone up to 6 bookstores, where book clubs have opened in every school, where people are actually genuinely reading, where writers and writing and publishing has proliferated to maybe 6 or 7 times in that decade. What more could I ask for but to keep treading down this path which I started in 2007 with the total commitment to work with books and publishing and to get stories out there. And on the side, we've been running this monthly author interaction event called Write Circle since 2012 in Jaipur. The stories of women are something that I've always been very, very attached to, being a woman myself and having had the trajectory of having to fight and establish what I wanted to. We initiated something called the Woman Up Summit, which we did 3 successful editions of. Now, the idea of this was to integrate more and more women into their workforce, and to also reintegrate women who left the workforce for whatever reason. But it was not just about increasing the number of women in the workforce. It was also about celebrating women who have achieved whatever they have on their own, whether it's in the corporate space, whether it's done in fashion, in performing arts, in cinema, in sports, in the cultural space. It's about normalizing the fact that we as women cannot be defined by our gender. We have a position on the table. We need to make special efforts to close it, to kind of say that, yes, just because I'm a woman, I don't need to demand or fight for my rights. I have those rights. I don't need permission to do things. So why is it so surprising that women reach the top in banking, in finance, in fintech, in edutech, in whatever other field, in science, in space science? Why is it such a surprise? Why is it always pointed out that we as women are special in a way that we are weaker? We are not. We have that space, we have the seat on the table, and we just need to normalize that. And that is what Woman Up is all about. Another segue that we made was to capture stories of our heritage. So we curated something called Soul Connect experiences to showcase Jaipur and the wealth of our heritage through our architecture, through our temples, through our textile traditions, through our statue making craft, through pottery, to lac making, music, dance, our various other performing arts, even inlay work. We customize and curate personalized experiences. We showcase our heritage in the most genuine manner through Soul Connect. We even started a temple music series. We continue to do those once a month in the old temples of our city. It is just to kind of revive the musical traditions of what we used to have centuries back. That's what Syahi is doing, about capturing stories in different ways and taking those kind of steps that nobody else took before. Syahi is a socio-cultural enterprise, and the wealth comes in shapes and forms of goodwill, trust, renewal, love, growth. Because we are dependent on selling the rights of a book in different territories and mediums, and the gestation period for a fiscal turnaround is long and not that large. Let me just put it as tactfully as I can. A book takes any time from 6 to 8 months to a year and a half to be published from the time we pitch it out. So as a business model, I'd say we're still figuring it out. Yes, even after all these years. But it's the validation, it's the appreciation, it's the respect, and that Syahi receives, and the joy of seeing a new book in our hands. That is the joy that I live for every single day. And the satisfaction also of creating and executing events, no matter how small or big, any events around storytelling. And the thrill of finding new stories is what keeps us going. So in the end, it's all about what is it that I'm going to discover today? What's the new story that's going to reach my desk today? Everything we do, from books to events to experiences, it's all in search of that new, exciting tale that's going to come to us every day.